Some people are born into families that see them, celebrate them, nurture them. I was born into a family that looked at me, but only ever through the lens of who I wasn't. From as far back as I can remember, I was the quiet one, the serious one. The one with soil under her fingernails and books piled high in her bedroom. I asked questions no one wanted to answer, about the ocean, about bioluminescence, about what happens when a reef dies. But my parents, Kimberly and Lionel, didn't really care for questions. They preferred noise, sparkle, confidence. They preferred Collins. My brother could walk into a room and make everyone feel like the sun had just come out. He was charming from the moment he could talk. Got away with things I wouldn't dare try. I still remember how, at 8 years old, he broke the living room window playing indoor football. My mother gasped, ready to scold, but Collins grinned and said, "I was aiming for the stars, Mom." She laughed so hard she forgot the punishment entirely. When I accidentally dropped one of her glass vases during a science experiment the following week, I was grounded for a month. That pattern never changed. Collins was praised for his entrepreneurial spirit when he flunked out of uni to start a record label that burned through £20,000 in 2 years. When I graduated top of my class and earned a rare marine biology scholarship, they said, "It's nice you have a hobby." I worked night shifts to support my PhD, scrubbed lab floors, skipped meals to buy reagents. Meanwhile, Collins borrowed $5,000 from me during my final year, money I'd saved for a research trip to New Caledonia, and never paid me back. He said something about flipping it into crypto. When I cried about missing the trip, my father snapped, "That boy needs support. You should be proud to help him." I suppose I stopped hoping for fairness a long time ago. Instead, I built a life they couldn't see, one that didn't rely on their validation. It started with a coral restoration project in Palau, then a breakthrough with a team in Okinawa where we discovered a bioluminescent enzyme, one now being tested for cancer diagnostics. I led deep-sea expeditions, consulted on climate resilience for island nations. One of my patents was bought out by a conservation tech startup in Singapore. The payout was substantial, but I never posted about it, never called home with updates. It's easier that way. They still think I'm in some lab fiddling with fish tanks. So when the email came, subject line, "Family holiday, let's reconnect," I felt something tighten in my chest. Belize. All expenses paid. 1 week in a beach villa. Sun laughter. Good vibes only. Collins had written it, of course. Said he missed me. Said he wanted us to be a family again. I almost deleted it. But then I looked at the date. Exactly 1 month after a news article ran about my UN advisory role in marine preservation. Was it a coincidence? I read the email again, this time between the lines. And in my mind the translation was, "Collins needs money. Collins thinks you finally have some. Come get gaslit in paradise." Maybe I'm wrong, but time will tell. I closed my laptop, stared out the window of my villa in the Azores. The sea was calm that morning, a turquoise sheet stretching toward the horizon. I could have ignored it. I could have stayed in my quiet sanctuary, surrounded by data and people who respected me. But there's something about unfinished wounds. They throb under the surface, even when you've built a beautiful life on top of them. I booked my own flight. First class, of course. No one should have to process childhood trauma in economy. The moment I landed in Belize, I regretted saying yes. Not because of the place. It was stunning. White sand, palm trees that danced in the breeze. The air smelled like coconuts and salt water. But then I saw them, my parents standing by a luggage cart, waving like we were all part of some happy sitcom reunion. "Darling," my mother squealed, rushing to hug me. Her arms were thin and perfumed, and her designer sunglasses made her look like a retired actress. "How was your flight? Economy must have been a nightmare." I smiled tightly. "It was comfortable enough." "Still frugal, I see," my father muttered. "Good girl." And there it was. The old script. Collins arrived 5 minutes later, flanked by 2 staff members he claimed were assistants. Shirt open, gold chain glinting in the sun, he looked like a man who'd just sold an app, though I knew he hadn't. "Helen," he shouted. "You made it. You're not in a lab, are you? The world must be ending." I hugged him stiffly. "Hey, Collins." He clapped me on the back. "You look successful." A pause. "Still working with fish?" "Something like that," I said. On the drive to the villa, they talked non-stop about Collins' new venture, blockchain for food security. Whatever that meant. About their neighbor's daughter who just got engaged to a banker, about how lucky we were to have Collins pull this holiday together. No one asked about me. When we arrived, they showed me my room, small, window facing the back wall, right next to the utility closet. "We figured you're used to small spaces," Mum said brightly. I didn't argue. I unpacked slowly, carefully, as I always did. Placed my books by the bed, plugged in my laptop, slipped on my research watch. That night, I joined them for dinner by the sea. Collins held court as usual, talking about high-value connections and venture scaling. My parents beamed. I sipped my drink, silent, until a call buzzed on my phone. "Sorry," I said, stepping away. It was from the Marine Research Institute. A grant proposal had just been approved. Multi-million-dollar partnership. Global scope. I smiled, even as I heard Collins laugh behind me. Helen's probably texting her pet jellyfish. Let them laugh, I thought. They still didn't know who I'd become. But they were about to. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. The morning sun spilled through the narrow slats of my small window, casting stripes of gold across the floor like prison bars. A poetic touch, I thought, for someone once again caged in her family's version of reality. I dressed quietly, pulled my hair back, and slid on my watch, already counting down the minutes to low tide. There was a reef just off the beach I'd been eager to explore, but I knew better than to attempt any solitude before breakfast. Family appearances were mandatory. The others were already at the beachside buffet, sipping mimosas and laughing over some story Collins was telling with exaggerated hand gestures. My father wore his usual expression of detached pride. My mother was dabbing at her lip with a linen napkin like she was in a Vogue shoot. I slid into the empty seat at the corner of the table, half expecting no one to notice. "Oh, Helen," Mum said absently, barely looking up. "Can you pass the pineapple?" I did. They launched into talk of real estate, of Collins' pitch deck being reviewed by investors in Singapore, of a friend's son who had started a digital art platform with Buzz. I chewed slowly, tuning them out, letting the sounds of the ocean soothe the old ache in my chest. The ache that always surfaced when I realized, for the 100th time, I was invisible again. But fate, for once, had a different plan. "Excuse me," a voice said, nervous but clear. "Dr. Lindsay?" I looked up, and so did everyone else. A young man in a resort uniform stood beside our table, his face flushed with awe. He looked maybe 22, with a name tag that read Mateo and a towel slung over his arm. "Sorry to interrupt," he said quickly, eyes darting to my family. I recognized you. You gave the keynote at the Global Marine Science Gala last month, didn't you? The talk about symbiotic algae in stressed reef systems." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Yes," I said slowly. "I did." He beamed. "It was incredible. Your work with bioluminescent enzymes is what made me want to apply to marine biology school. I never thought I'd meet you in person." Now everyone at the table was frozen. Mateo continued, oblivious to the tension. "And the Yacht Lab project? Unreal. I follow the Foundation's page. Saw your underwater footage with the reef drones. Seriously, it's changed how people think about coral mapping." My mother blinked. My father sat back in his chair like someone had just yanked the tablecloth out from under him. Collins looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. I smiled softly. "That's very kind, Mateo. Thank you. Are you studying here?" He nodded. "Trying to. Applying for a local scholarship. But yeah, your research gives me hope. Just thank you." "Anytime," I said. He walked off, his steps a little lighter, and for a moment, the only sound was the gulls overhead. "Wait," Mum said, her voice high and tight. Did he call you Dr. Lindsay? I took a sip of my mimosa. Yes. As in? PhD doctor? As in, I hold 2 doctorates, actually. The silence cracked. But you said you worked in a lab, my father said, eyes narrowed. I do. On a private research vessel. It's a floating marine lab. We're currently documenting threatened coral ecosystems along the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. It's funded through a UN environmental contract and some private partnerships. Mum squeaked. I nodded. I also consult for their coastal climate initiatives. And one of my recent discoveries, the bioluminescent enzyme Matteo mentioned, is being developed into diagnostic tools for cancer detection. I licensed the patent last year. Collins gave a dry laugh, the sound brittle. Fish pay that well, huh? I turned to him, really looking this time. The tanned skin, the expensively casual clothes, the watch he wore upside down because he thought it was edgy. The man who'd floated through life on borrowed charm and borrowed money. I never said fish, I replied. But yes, life finds a way to reward those who dedicate themselves to it. Mum's voice softened, taking on that syrupy tone she used when trying to get her way. Why didn't you tell us, darling? We've been thinking you were just working quietly, in some university lab. Because that's what you chose to believe, I said. My father grunted. So you've been hiding all this? No, I said, folding my napkin. I've been living. You never asked. They all stared at me like I'd committed some betrayal by existing beyond their expectations. You live on a yacht? Collins asked, incredulous. Sometimes. I also own a coastal villa in the Azores, and a small island lab in Micronesia. Depends on where the work takes me. Mum blinked fast. A villa. Collins leaned forward, voice low. So you're rich? I held his gaze. Comfortable. There was a shift then, a recalibration, like a camera lens twisting into focus. They'd always seen me as the afterthought, the background noise to Collins' spotlight. But now I'd become someone they didn't understand, someone who existed beyond their narratives. Mum reached across the table, her diamond ring flashing in the sun. Helen, we're just so proud. Really? I had no idea. You've done so well. Thanks, I said flatly, pulling my hand away. And we want to hear all about it, she added too quickly. All of it. The research, the enzymes. You always were clever, weren't you, Helen? My dad nodded in agreement, stunned. Always had her nose in a book. Never thought it'd lead to this, though. And the foundation, Collins added. That sounds scalable. Are you looking for partners? Tech integrations? I've got contacts. There it was. The pivot. Pride into interest. Affection into opportunity. I felt it like a cold gust under the tropical sun. No, Collins, I said softly. We're fully funded. But you've got reach now, he insisted. Visibility. I'm just saying, we could collaborate. Family synergy. I stood up, brushing crumbs from my sundress. I think I'll take that reef walk now. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Helen, Mum called after me. We should do dinner. Just the 4 of us. Proper catch-up. Maybe tomorrow. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked along the shoreline, the sand warm beneath my feet, the waves humming against my ankles. A hermit crab scuttled by, dragging its borrowed shell. I smiled at it. There had been a time when I, too, had carried someone else's image of me. Hidden inside it, shaped myself to fit their comfort. But not anymore. Let them stare. Let them question how they missed it. I wasn't their invisible girl anymore. And they were only just beginning to realize it. When I returned from the reef walk that afternoon, the suite was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that doesn't mean peace, but planning. The kind that precedes a pitch. I'd spent the last hour snorkeling with a local marine guide, a woman named Priya who, in a few short minutes, knew more about me than my family ever had. We spoke about coral bleaching patterns, the impact of cruise ship pollution, and the devastatingly beautiful paradox of sea life thriving amidst shipwrecks. With her, I'd felt alive, unfiltered, unjudged. Now, back at the resort, I could feel the weight of performance waiting for me like damp linen. The suite door creaked as I stepped inside. Helen, Collins called from the balcony, his voice far too warm. I sighed quietly and made my way toward him. He was sitting under a wrought-tan parasol, 2 glasses of something amber already poured. He gestured to the chair opposite him like we were co-conspirators. I figured we should have a proper chat, he said. Is that what this is? He laughed, the way he always did when trying to disguise tension as charm. Come on, don't be like that. I didn't sit. I just want to talk, he added quickly. Like old times. There were no old times, Collins. Just moments where I tolerated your presence. His face stiffened, just for a second, before he smoothed it back into place. Okay, fair. Maybe I wasn't the perfect big brother. You're younger than me. You were always seemed wiser. Smarter. Mom and Dad just never got it, you know? You were out there with your fish tanks and science kits, and I was trying to impress them. Win them over. It was always a game. And you were always winning. Not really, he said, swirling his drink. Not where it counted. I raised an eyebrow. Is this the part where you confess to a deep, unspoken envy? No, he said, chuckling again. This is the part where I ask you for a favor. I said nothing. Just waited. I've got this idea, he began. It's big. Like disrupt an industry big. Sustainable tech meets lifestyle branding. Picture this, biodegradable smart packaging, infused with traceable elements linked to NFTs. No, he blinked. You haven't even heard the full pitch. I don't need to. The answer's no. He leaned forward, smile faltering. Helen, I'm not asking for a handout. I'm offering you a stake. We partner. You invest a little seed capital. Hell, call it an angel round. I loop in some guys I know from Singapore and Dubai, and boom, we're building something. Together. As family. I sat down slowly. Not out of interest. Out of caution. You mean the family that laughed when I chose marine biology over accounting? The one that told me my work was a cute phase? The one that sent you to 3 different universities, while I worked graveyard shifts to finish my PhDs? He bristled. That was Dad's decision. And Mum's. And yours when you took my savings to invest in that app that failed within 6 months. You never paid it back. He had the decency to look away then. I was 18, Helen. And how much older than you was I, Collins? But I still knew what no meant. You didn't. Silence sat between us like a third sibling, more honest than either of us. I'm doing well now, he said quietly. Or I was. Until the market shifted. I just need a bridge. I looked him over, his designer sunglasses, his linen shirt that probably cost more than my first microscope, the confident tilt of a man who had never truly had to fall because someone always softened the landing. You want a bridge, I said. But when I was drowning, all I got was laughter. He flinched. I stood again. I'm not funding your latest pipe dream, Collins. I built what I have through sweat, salt water, and silence. Not through charm. He stood too, voice rising. You owe us. That stopped me cold. I turned. Excuse me? You think this is all just you? That you built your little empire in a vacuum? Mum and Dad sacrificed too. They put a roof over your head, fed you. They fed both of us. They believed in you. No, they believed in you. I was the afterthought. He opened his mouth, but another voice cut in. Enough. We both turned. Dad stood in the doorway, red-faced and trembling. You walk around here like you're some kind of queen now, he spat. Talking down to your family. We were there for you. I crossed my arms. No, you were there. But you were never for me. His voice cracked like a whip. You owe us for everything we gave you. We raised you. You raised me to believe I was less, I said quietly now. To think that being smart was shameful, that quiet meant weak, that my worth was only what you understood. But I outgrew your narrative, and now you can't stand it. Mom appeared behind him, clutching a resort robe like armor. Darling, please. Let's not fight. We're family. I looked at all of them, 3 faces that only now saw me clearly because someone else had done the unveiling. I'm not your ATM, I said. I'm not your redemption arc. I walked past them, heart pounding, not from fear but from freedom. Collins called after me. This is what success did to you, huh? Turned you cold. I paused at the threshold, turned slightly. No, you did that. And then I left. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Back in my room, I closed the door and leaned against it. My hands trembled, not with regret, but with release. Years of silence, swallowed words, and buried fury had finally found their way out. I walked to the balcony, where the ocean glistened like truth. Somewhere out there, under those waves, were creatures more honest than my own kin. My phone buzzed on the table. Messages from relatives. Aunties I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins I barely remembered. Collins' family. You're too proud now, Anne? So money has finished raising you? He just needs a leg up. What are you doing with all that marine money anyway? I deleted every message. Then I blocked every number. They only knew me now because of what I had, not who I was. I changed into my swimsuit and grabbed my dive bag. There was a reef waiting to be studied. A colony of octopuses I'd been hoping to observe at dusk. As I walked toward the shoreline, past the cabanas and beach chairs, I didn't look back. This wasn't just a vacation anymore. It was an exodus. The sun had barely risen when I checked out of the resort. No dramatic farewell, no lingering glances back. I left the key card on the marble counter, nodded at the concierge, and walked away with the quiet certainty of someone who owed nothing. My flight wasn't until evening, but I had no intention of lingering around poolside while my parents and Collins stewed in whatever story they were now spinning. Instead, I had chartered a small seaplane to take me to another island, a more remote one where I sometimes partnered with local researchers for coral restoration projects. I hadn't planned to visit it this trip, but after the last few days, I needed something grounding. Something real. When we landed, I was greeted by 3 familiar faces, members of my research team, Tomas, Indira, and Joe. All smiles, sun-warmed skin, and wind-whipped hair. People who saw me, not my resume, who didn't care about my bank account, only the ocean currents and microalgae samples we'd left behind last season. Tough week, Indira asked as we hauled our gear toward the bungalow we shared near the cove. You could say that, I said, smiling faintly. We cracked open a bottle of champagne that had been waiting in the fridge for a celebration we hadn't gotten around to. Now felt like the right time. To walking away, I said, raising my glass. To staying gone, Joe added. We toasted, laughter bubbling up like a spring long buried. With them, I didn't have to minimize myself. I didn't have to dim my light so someone else could shine. They had never needed me to be smaller. 2 days later, the headlines broke. Tech startup linked to financial mismanagement. UK entrepreneur under fire. The article included Collins' name. Not prominently, he was still too minor league for the front pages, but enough for the story to spread among our extended family and social circle. Apparently, his sustainable tech meets lifestyle branding venture had been flagged for misusing investor funds. The NFT packing gimmick was exposed as recycled code from a defunct crypto app. There were murmurs of lawsuits. I didn't gloat, not outwardly, but I did sip my morning coffee a little slower, and I let myself smile. My inbox soon filled with messages again, this time from my parents. Mom, call me please, sweetheart. We're very worried about your brother. Dad, Collins made some mistakes. We all do, but family forgives. Can we talk? Mom again. We're so proud of you. Always have been. You've done so well. We didn't know how to say it before. I stared at the messages, each one more polished than the last. As if carefully scrubbed clean of the insults they'd hurled days earlier. As if rewriting history would erase the bruises their words had left on my skin. They didn't say sorry. Not really. They said we're proud. But only after the world did. Only after a resort staffer recognized me. After wealth and recognition made me worthy. That's not love. That's branding. I tapped and held on each message. Block. 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 It was quiet afterward. The kind of quiet that no longer felt dangerous. The bungalow opened directly onto the sea. Every morning, I would rise before the sun, walk barefoot to the edge of the water, and let the tide kiss my ankles. The ocean had always spoken a language I understood. Not loud, not demanding. Just there, eternal, evolving, full of unseen life. We spent the next few days diving, recording coral data, tagging sea turtles, and updating sonar maps. The work was meticulous and slow. Exactly the kind of effort no one applauds on social media, but the kind that saves ecosystems. At night, we cooked together, grilled fish, cassava, mango salsa, and shared stories under starlight. Not one of them asked how much I made. No one cared about my keynote speeches or patents. They cared that I showed up, that I loved the water, that I was kind, and that, I realized, was all the family I'd ever needed. A week later, I stood on the deck of my research yacht, the Thalassa. She was a sleek, silent beauty, solar-powered, low-emission, built to navigate delicate ecosystems without disturbing them. I'd named her after the Greek primordial spirit of the sea. The open water glittered beneath us, the horizon wide and waiting. I looked around, at my crew, at the onboard lab I'd funded myself, at the rows of digital charts glowing on monitors, and felt something settle in my bones. Peace. I was exactly where I was meant to be. There were no voices telling me I was too much or not enough. No comparisons, no reminders of who I wasn't. Just the steady pulse of the ocean and the brilliance of work done with purpose. Later that evening, I recorded a voice memo, a habit I'd picked up over the years. I often dictated my thoughts to revisit later, when the tide of emotion had ebbed. They only noticed me once I became valuable, I said softly. But that's not love. Love sees you when you're invisible. Love celebrates you when there's nothing to gain. I paused. If you've ever been the invisible one, the overlooked, the underestimated, keep building. Quietly, fiercely. Let them doubt you. Let them forget you. One day, they'll realize they were never part of your becoming. That night, we anchored near a coral atoll we'd be mapping at dawn. The stars overhead looked impossibly close. I stood alone at the bow, letting the wind wrap around me like an old friend. I thought of the little girl who used to lie on her stomach in front of the fish tank, watching guppies dart behind fake plants, who cried when a goldfish died and got laughed at for it, who dreamed of oceans while everyone else focused on safe careers and marriage prospects. She'd made it, not because anyone cleared the path, but because she refused to let anyone block it. Not in spite of her invisibility, but because of it. Because when no one's watching, you can become anything. And I had. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? What did you do about it? If you were Helen, would you forgive them after what happened? Who do you think is more dangerous, an entitled sibling or manipulative parents? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories coming up just for you.